The most valuable trait that an accounting professional should have is a thirst for knowledge and being inquisitive. I always felt the need to perhaps learn more and do the best you can every day and work hard. But at the same time, I feel don't take yourself too seriously. Hello, my name is Prem Lobo. I'm a principal at Cohen Hamilton Steger and Company. It's a business valuation and damages quantification firm located in Toronto. At first, when I was in business school, I had no real desire or intent to go into accounting, but all of my colleagues and classmates were in accounting. So I said, okay, well, it seems like an interesting career, and there were lots of firms hiring at the time. I joined a national firm at the time, and I did my 2-3 years at the national firm. I did my CA and a CPA, CA at the time. But I realized after a while that perhaps auditing and public accounting wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. So I began looking around at alternate careers, whether it's tax or consulting or other types of specialty designations. And fortunately for me at the time, a good friend of mine called me one day and he said, Prem, I heard you're thinking of moving on. I work in this really interesting field called business valuations. I had never ever heard of it in my life. I asked more about it, did some research, and I thought, oh, this sounds quite interesting. It's value added, it's consulting and accounting and marketing and everything combined. So I interviewed at a few firms. I decided to accept an offer, and I've been in valuations ever since for about 20-something years now. Best decision I ever made in my life. I really enjoy the calculation aspect of it, dealing with people. It's an integrated discipline involving many different things that one learns in business school. So I'm still doing valuations now and still quite enjoying myself, to be honest. After getting my CA, I always felt the need to perhaps learn more and try to branch off into other areas. And again, I was quite inquisitive about different aspects of accounting and valuations. So I did get my CBV, which is a Chartered Business Valuation designation. A few years later, I also got I'm an accredited member of the American Society of Appraisers. So I have an AM designation as well. So those are valuation designations. A related designation that I got along the way is certified in entity and intangible valuations, and that one specializes more in intangibles and goodwill and so on. I also do a lot of fraud work and investigations. So I did get my CFE, which is I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I'm a CFF, which is a certified in financial forensics. So those are all fraud designations as well. And again, they mirror what I do in work. It's always good to refresh your knowledge. So I always provide the advice to young accountants, keep on learning and enhancing yourself and taking the time to keep refreshing your knowledge as much as possible. I think the most difficult designation, the most challenging, was the Chartered Business Valuation designation. It's a very comprehensive study program, very similar to the CPA process. It does a very good job of teaching you valuations and also damages, quantifications, and cash flow modeling, and various aspects of what you actually do as a CBV. So that required a number of courses with exams at the end, and then a rather challenging final exam as well. Together, that was certainly the most intense experience, but also at the end of the day, a more meaningful and rewarding experience to pass and get that CBV designation. So my firm, Cohen Hamilton Steger, has offices in Toronto and Ottawa. We're a boutique firm, meaning we're rather focused, and we have about 25 to 30 professionals that work for us. And we primarily do 3 areas of practice. The first one is business valuations, valuing of company shares; damages quantifications, which is quantifying financial losses in legal disputes; and forensic accounting, pursuing allegations of improprieties or frauds and so on. All 3 are very broad areas with lots of different contexts and types of cases, and we focus and specialize in those areas. As a boutique firm, one of our greatest advantages is, aside from having a very low, I suppose, overhead and cost structure, we rarely have other conflicts. We don't do audit work or tax work. So when a client comes to us, we have more ability to be clear and independent, because if we audit the company, perhaps our independence is jeopardized. So we're very focused in that area, and our team is very experienced, so we are able to jump on engagements very quickly with a superb depth of experience and knowledge and so on. The usual advice that I got when I began working is work hard and also play hard. In this day and age, with a lot of online working and a lot of remote working and so on, it's very easy to perhaps not focus. But I think if you want to distinguish yourself, if you really work very hard to establish yourself in the beginning, and then later on, perhaps you can take your foot off the accelerator a little bit. But certainly in the first 10, 15 years, just give it your all. But at the same time, be well-rounded, I think. Because right throughout, I always felt the need to read and watch reality TV or engage in other recreational activities. It's good to be a well-rounded person. You have a meeting with a client, or you have, discussions with your colleagues, You're not going to talk debits and credits and discounted cash flows and that type of thing all the time. You want to have a conversation that people know that you're actually a well-rounded, interesting person that they want to do work with. So my advice for foreign trained professionals is persevere, be patient at first. It is difficult. I mean, my family immigrated here from the Middle East, so it took a long time to get started, and both my parents did something completely different from what they were trained to. But be that as it may, as an accountant, you would need a little bit more experience or training or retraining, if you will. But once you get that, again, if your core skills are good, if you're a good, strong, smart person, that will show. And you will eventually be back at the same that you should have been, same level or position, but just it might take a little bit of time. So be patient, it's part of the journey, but it's a wonderful place to be, and it's well worth it in the long run. I think for our firm, the one or two things we look for new candidates is work experience of some sort in accounting, because we feel that working in accounting or in a national or international accounting firm teaches you a lot, and it teaches you how to be organized, basic skills in terms of documenting your findings, articulating your findings and conclusions and so on. So we prefer accountants that have been at some sort of CA firm or some sort of accounting function beforehand. So a bit of work experience, but relevant experience. I mean, ultimately, you do need to be able to analyze and look at numbers, but also articulate your findings and so on. So sometimes, how you do in university and how you've been rated at your firms and your previous jobs are important as well. So we would look at those two aspects. And then finally, once a person comes in for interview, we might then see if they can convey that knowledge and excellence on paper in real life. I would say my all-time favorite interview question, and I don't do this very often, so full disclosure, is if you had 3 historical figures that could come for dinner, who would you invite and why? It's something different. Interviewee will have to think a little bit and show, well, I kind of read, I'm up on perhaps culture or academics or however they articulate it. It helps, at least from our perspective, show that someone can communicate, can think very quickly, and also what's going on behind their minds, other than, I'm a good hard worker and I do good work, something like that. So that's a really fun question. So, in my opinion, the most valuable trait that an accounting professional should have is a thirst for knowledge and being inquisitive, professionally skeptical, so perhaps not always accepting what you're told and, asking questions, and to always be curious. So, if you, find out some bit of information, kind of ask a few questions to make sure that you understand it. If you don't understand it, do some research and learn more. And perhaps then you can make your own assessment, an independent assessment of this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. So inquisitiveness, if I might say, is probably one of the biggest traits. The biggest life lesson I've learned from being an accountant is do the best you can every day and understand what you're doing, ask questions, do your job, and make sure that that's done well. But at the same time, I feel don't take yourself too seriously. If something goes wrong or, you have a question or have to deal with somebody, don't keep it only to, well, this is my job, I do the work. Have a bit of a broader perspective on life. Don't take yourself too seriously as I'm really good or I'm this and I'm that and I've done so many, accounting exercises before. But I think laugh at yourself or, have a broader perspective on yourself, because at the end of the day, it's you as a person. So work hard, but also don't take yourself too seriously. I would have to think hard for that one. There's been many sort of interesting days or good days. I can say it's probably when I was an accountant at this national firm. I came back one afternoon on a Friday and the office manager told me, Prem, we're sending you to Houston, Texas on this to be determined period of time on this large audit, and we never know when you're going to come back. So myself and a number of other young CAs gathered our bags that weekend, took our degrees with us and headed off to the airport. As luck would have it, the Americans Customs pulled me aside into the secondary screening area, and then I had nothing else to do. So I began reading my income tax act because I was studying for an exam, my CA exams. Logical thing to do, read your income tax act when you're in immigration. And then, this girl walks by and she's like, what are you doing? Like, just getting ready for my exam. And we began talking and so on and so forth. And that girl, is my current partner. And that was probably the best day or experience of my career. So if I were to think back, if one could go back into a time machine and provide advice to an earlier version of myself, I think I would probably say be more patient. Oftentimes, as a young business school grad or accountant, you want to move your career faster. You want certain things, you would like to advance in certain ways, or you perhaps have a view of how to do things, and someone more senior than you has a different view. As a young person, I would say to myself, listen, when you are able to be in that senior role, then, you can do things in a way that you think. But until then, perhaps learn and take the opportunity to get as much experience as possible so that you are better equipped to deal with that. So patience and let things come in their own time is what I would say to myself. Recommendations for inspiring books are very difficult because I read many books and I read religiously. So my first advice to everyone is read as much as possible, because I know in this generation reading is not necessarily as popular. But I would say by far the main set of books that one should read is The Lord of the Rings. I used to read them religiously every 6 months. Later on, I began alternating that with the Harry Potter books for the same reasons. So much inspiration in all the Harry Potter series. And between those two books, there's two Hemingway books, The Great Gatsby and The Sun Also Rises. So those are my 4 recommendations for many, many reasons. But The Lord of the Rings teaches you so much. I would say my ideal type of vacation that I've already been on would be 2. My partner and I like to go to the Caribbean a lot, and we live off the grid, so we don't generally stay at resorts. We like to go off resort, and I feel that that's what teaches you the most. It immerses you in the culture. It leads you to appreciate what you have versus what someone else doesn't have, and appreciate life more. And out of all those Caribbean destinations, I've been to Jamaica quite often, and I love Jamaica. I'll go back over and over again, and the food is delicious. Their adventures are great, whether you want waterfalls or fishing or just rambling in the mountains. The people are amazing, so I would honestly consider myself an honorary Jamaican citizen, to be honest. So Jamaica is my very popular spot, but living off the grid and off the major resorts. Perhaps equally fun was going to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. The food there is delicious, the sights are breathtaking, whether you go to Capri or Sorrento or Positano, everything is very fresh and well prepared. And for sort of a nerd like me, you go to places like Capri. There's lots of historical significance. So when you stand in a spot as a tourist, taking selfies, you actually don't realize how much history is on that spot. And when you take a selfie, you're like, okay, that's great, but you don't capture the 2,000 years of amazing and sometimes horrific history that's on any of those spots, which I feel like sometimes touch the walls and I feel, oh, I can almost imagine this 2,000 years ago, what it was like. So Amalfi Coast is one beautiful spot, and Jamaica would be another good spot. So my mindset for overcoming challenges is try not to let them get you down. You'll have many challenges, and not everybody will always appreciate what you do, and not everyone will always agree with what you do. And I've certainly had, challenges we all have in our career. So I try for every failure or challenge or setback, I redouble my efforts to either learn from that or to say, oh, listen, I, perhaps need to do more work or research or knowledge in this area. It gives me more motivation to do something productive rather than stew on it and say, oh my goodness, oh, woe is me, that type of thing. So that's kind of what I do. And I also think back to family, and say, oh, you know what, work is work, and you can never win over all the clients or all the folks that you deal with. But you know what, work is work, and it will always get done. And tomorrow, someone else will do the same, role, but your family is always going to be there. So I take comfort in family as well.